You're listening to episode 139, Pursuing Dreams on Your Journey to Heal from the Past with Matthew Greer. Welcome to the Grass Gets Greener podcast, the show for survivors by survivors. I'm your host, Melissa Wilson, a bullying survivor and anti-bullying advocate. And each week you'll hear from a survivor who has overcome a traumatic experience to go on to not only survive, but thrive, so that you can too, starting now. Hey there, welcome, and thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I'm so grateful to have you here as we start off the 5th year of the podcast, which I'm just super excited about. And I hope you had a chance to check out the recap episode last time. If you haven't, you can find that over at thegrassgetsgreener.com/recap and the number 6, as it's the 6th one overall. And so today we're going to be joined by Matthew Greer of myalphalife.org to kick off the start of the 5th year. And before we get into it, I just want to mention that this episode is sponsored by Navni. Navni is the top-ranked anonymous writing website in the world. Navni provides free wellness resources and low-cost online therapy services to help people cope with various levels of emotional distress. Write anonymously, feel better at novni.com. So Matt joins us to talk about how he's been able to transform his life after being impacted by sexual abuse at a very young age, and not having a supportive environment while growing up. In particular, Matt's going to talk about the sexual abuse he experienced when he was just 4 years old, and how he felt like he couldn't tell anyone, and how he learned to become a people pleaser, and how his home environment made him fearful to talk about any problems he was having, and how he didn't talk about the abuse until he was an adult, and how his relationships were impacted, and how he used isolation as a coping strategy, and how that changed when he was in a relationship, how things started to shift for him when he began being responsible for the things happening in his life, the role that personal development has played in his healing journey, how having a coach has impacted his life, and he'll talk about the things he still struggles with and how he reacts differently now, and the work Matt is doing with other men who are in a similar situation that he was in, and also the book that he's currently working on. Now, while this episode isn't just for men, it is a particularly good one for the guys out there to listen to, as well as the women who are supporting a male survivor. So I hope you'll find this episode helpful, and without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into it, and I'll go bring Matt on. Matt, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining me here today to share your story with us.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I'm very honored that you've invited me on your show to share my story and to provide value to your show. Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to have you here. So you and I met through a coaching program that we were both in, and we got to connect, and I learned that, you had a story to share about things that you've experienced, that have, manifested themselves in your adult life, and how you've gone on a healing journey that has transformed you into the person you are today. So I'm happy to have you here to talk about your story and the things that you've done in your healing journey that have helped you, and the work you're doing today as a result. So Matt, what I like to do here is, start at the beginning with your story of what you experienced, so that we have that context, and then we'll go from there. How does that sound to you?
That sounds great.
Yeah, yeah, just kind of start us off and share with us what you'd like us to know about, what you experienced.
Sure. Well, I grew up with a mother and father and a younger brother, and actually 2 younger brothers. Yeah, my youngest is about 9 years younger than myself. So pretty, normal family with everybody together. As far as I can remember as a child, I can think back to, I guess, my earliest memory at least as far as the things that affected me the most. I remember being young. We were in Newton, Kansas, is where we where I was born. And I just remember, I guess as a child, I just remember a lot of the tougher times. And one of the times I remember is being 4 years old and being abused by the babysitter's son. And that was where I was sexually abused, and remember being able to not go home and tell anybody because I felt like bad news meant making my parents upset, and mostly making my father upset, because it seemed like bad news meant getting hit, or bad news meant getting yelled at. And I just remember growing up that was the last thing I ever wanted. And at that point, I put other people's needs ahead of my own. And I think this is where I became somewhat of a people pleaser. And throughout my life, I just always aimed to not create a mess, not to make people angry, but to always put other people's needs ahead of my own, and just want people to like me. So I did whatever I could for people to like me.
Mm-hmm. Did that abuse happen? Sorry, I was just going to ask, did that abuse happen just that one time?
I remember it happening maybe two or three times at the babysitters, and I'm not quite sure what happened. I'm not quite sure what happened, but we ended up changing babysitters. I don't know. I feel like I've suppressed a lot of childhood, and there's a lot of details I don't remember, but I just remember after that happening, us going to a different babysitter, but I just knowing that I've never told anybody, so I don't know. I just don't know if it was grace of God that, maybe prices went up, maybe I started acting differently. I don't know, but yeah.
And you were so young, of course, too.
Times. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's the other thing, right? Like, just the things we remember as a kid aren't always what they seem, right? Like, we just have a limited filter and a limited understanding of life at that age. So yeah, to fully know what was going on at that time, yeah, I really can't tell you. I just remember that happening, and then moving on to a different babysitter. And so fortunately, it wasn't like an ongoing thing throughout my childhood, the sexual abuse, the walking on eggshells, and being afraid was, though, a thing that happened probably, I was going to say happened all the way through high school until I moved out, but I definitely remember being afraid to even talk to my dad about a DUI that I got when I was 30. And it wasn't even until I was 35 that I got over this fear of feeling unworthy because of everything that happened to me, and being able to actually open up and talk to my parents about it. And that was kind of hard, because for my mom, it was like just happening for the first time, and it was 30 years down the road.
Yeah, it sounds like the effects of it definitely, carried far beyond, the extent of how long the abuse, went on for, of course. And I think that just goes to show, like, how impactful that sort of thing is, and especially, at such a young age. I mean, even though, like, you don't fully understand everything at that age, it's still so impactful. And so, yes, I can hear, in what you're explaining as to how it just continued to affect you, and how you kept it to yourself as well. When was the first time that you shared it with someone?
it was during my Thanksgiving. Every Thanksgiving, I'll fly home for the holidays, and it was, yeah, when I was 35. That's gonna be 5 years ago that I finally. Well, so that was the first time I finally shared with my parents. There was actually a live event that I went to because I I've gotten myself into personal development, and going to live events and doing that type of work where I'm constantly becoming more aware of just why I do things and why I think things. And actually my mentor, Jonathan Budd, at the time, I went to an event and he was talking about his abuse, and at that time he was allowing people to come up stage and to, just talk to him and get some love and give some love. And I went up stage and I got to talk to him, and that was the first time I ever told anybody what I had been going through or what I had experienced as far as being sexually abused. I was just so I suppressed it. I basically just made myself never think about it again. And when I started doing this type of work, I started realizing what kind of hold it had on me. And at that time, I didn't want that. I didn't want to be caged, I guess is the best way I can feel about it. Just caged and trapped and yeah. I think trapped is just the best way I can express it.
Mm-hmm. And all that time that, you weren't talking about it with anyone, were you aware of, all the things that you were struggling with, had to do with the abuse that happened when you were 4 years old?
No, looking back at it, I had been constantly told that, I'm a really calm, mellow, even-keeled guy, very, very nice. I've always been the nice guy, right? So no, I really didn't see how I was showing up in relationships. And yeah, I if anything went sideways or went, against plan, it was always somebody else's problem. It was never my problem, because, I had plenty of evidence that, hey man, you're a really good guy. You're this and you're that. And yeah, I never thought I had a problem. I never saw any issues. I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was playing sports. I mean, I wasn't getting great grades, but I was getting decent grades. I went to college. I got an engineering degree. I had relationships, and all that time, I really just never saw how I showed up in relationships.
How were you showing up in relationships?
Disconnected, disengaged. I mean, it's really easy to be happy when things are going well. It's really easy when things are going well. But when things would get tough or things would get challenging, I would default to my dad's way of being, and that would be anger. That would be disconnection. That would be just cutting people off. And my dad, he wouldn't talk to people for what seemed like 2 weeks. Maybe, if I can be right, it was maybe months that sometimes he would not talk to us because of whatever bullshit was happening. And that's how I would use conflict resolution. That's how I would just disconnect and disengage and just not talk to you if I was pissed. And at the time, I felt like that was just me. That was me doing a favor to the other person, because otherwise I would be using anger. I would say things that wouldn't be nice, or wouldn't even be true, or things just that would make me right and the other person wrong. And at the time, I was just how you deal with conflict. That was my way. That was how I was taught, and I just really never really thought anything different. I think I really normalized the abusive environment that I grew up in. It was just normal, and actually just talking to someone the other day, how one person's environment, they can never imagine having to be in that kind of home where every day was a constant challenge, and not pissing your dad off so that he wouldn't either yell at you or experience some kind of physical abuse, or just wishing your mom would not do whatever dad doesn't like so that she wouldn't have to experience the physical abuse or the anger. And I just, that was the normal day. That was like, all families go through this stuff, right? And it's just not true. And it's just mind blowing how I was able to normalize such a abusive environment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no,
Do you
had
feel
no
like,
clue.
yeah, do you feel like growing up in that type of environment made it more difficult for you to be able to open up sooner about the sexual abuse?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I never felt safe to have problems.
Mm-hmm.
I just never felt safe. It's really weird to say that. Like,
Yeah, you didn't feel like you were allowed to
put
have
that in words.
any problems.
Right.
Everything had to be
Holy
perfect.
crap, man. Wow, man. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never put into words like that before, but yeah, I just never felt that I could have problems. Yeah, I felt like I had to be perfect, and no matter what I did, it never was perfect, and no matter what I did, I was never good enough.
Wow.
And that was really the yeah.
That's going to put so much pressure on you too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I never understood why people thought I was so calm when I was in such survival mode all the time. So it was just survival mode. That was me surviving, was being the quiet one, not saying anything, so I wouldn't piss someone off. And that was the mode of operation.
Mm-hmm. Were you feeling that, like, kind of like just bubbling under the surface, like feeling like you wanted to explode because you had to be this way, you had to try to be perfect, and you couldn't, express when things were wrong?
I didn't have that feeling until 5 years living with my girlfriend and her stepdaughter. It wasn't until I was put into the parenting role that bubbling up feeling started happening. Because by myself, I can destroy my own life. Like, I can go in hibernation for months and not talk to anybody except for the people at work. Just talk to the people I need to talk to in order to get by. Alone, I could do that. Now I was living with someone and her daughter, and that option was no longer an option. I was no longer able to just, go home and go to work, shut people out, and then just go about what I now know as a depressing day. I just would go through the day like a zombie, basically. And now that I had, a girlfriend and daughter,
it sounds
really
like your coping mechanism was taken away from you.
It really was. It really was. And at the time, I had no idea that's how I was coping. That was just me. I guess I didn't have the concept of coping. I would lean on alcohol, and I would lean on pot to numb myself out. And for me, that was just going out and having a good time, and even then, I didn't consider that me coping with my crap. It was just another day.
Yeah.
um,
When did you start making the connections, between how you were being and the things you were struggling with, the sexual abuse that you experienced and the environment that you grew up in?
I got laid off. I was laid off in 2010 from a pretty decent job, and at the time, I would always ask myself, what would I do if I wasn't doing construction? And then all of a sudden, I got the opportunity to figure that out, and that raised a lot of questions for me, like why was it me that got laid off when there were other guys that were newer than I was, that were still there. And I always just blame it on the market. It was, it was reset. It was 2010, right? Like right when middle of the recession. So I would just justify it with that. But as I started searching for that answer, what would I do? I started I fell on Amway actually. I started doing Amway, and guess what? That's what my parents did, right? So of course I'm I'm doing what my parents do, without even knowing it really. And the great thing about Amway at the time was their their personal development concept. And so I started hearing things and I started listening to things, and one of the biggest concepts that just kept coming up was that you get to take responsibility for the things in your life, right? Like you're not the victim. Things aren't being done to you, they're being done for you. And you can either blame people for everything that's happening, or you could be responsible for what's happening in your life and move forward with things. And that's when I started taking, I don't like saying taking. This is when I started being responsible for the things in my life. I still fully didn't understand why things are happening, or why, or even what my real thought process was. It's just the concept of, okay, it's in my life now. How are you going to deal with it? Is, I think, the starting, the genesis of me and doing my personal development journey and my self-discovery journey. Because after I got laid off, and now it was go time. It was time to figure it out. And thankfully, I had a really supportive girlfriend who just poured love into me. My sponsor at Amway was also very supportive and very love. So I had a system that wouldn't let me fail, which at the time, that's not what I saw. I just saw people just pushing me and, just always on my case about stuff. At the time, that's what I saw. But it still pushed me forward. It still pushed me forward to figuring out what the heck am I going to do with my life. And
yeah, and it's not an easy journey to begin, right?
No, it's not. Well, it's really for me. It was really confusing. Like, I just found it very confusing because there's a lot of elements of letting go of the past and forgiving and all this stuff, like just not letting the past hold you back. And yeah, I wasn't really into figuring out how to let go of the past. It was like, okay, past is holding me back, so I won't think about it, which isn't dealing with it. It's just sweeping it under the rug. So I got really stuck in the doing mode. Like, what do I got to do to build Amway? What do I got to do to create extra income so that I'm not being leveraged by the employer, right? This was Amway's thing. It's like, why build your dreams for someone else when you can be building your dreams for yourself? So I got really stuck in that mode of just doing, and just sweeping the past under the rug. And that, that later clearly wasn't the answer either. But that was the beginning. That was how I started this whole journey and realizing that something can be different.
Mm-hmm. So, this was in 2010, you said?
Yeah, 2010.
And then, like, what are some other things that you've done since then?
Well, I'm really big into live events. I try to go to 3 or 4 live events a year where I'm around people who are about transforming their lives, whether it be just going from unemployed to getting a job to uh, quitting their job and building a business, and or just looking to fix their marriage. There was a lot of reasons why people go to these workshops, for life transformation, and
Mm-hmm.
it was through these events that that really started making a difference.
Yeah.
Just hearing other people's stories and realizing, what, as crappy as I thought my life was, I would not change it for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we've been to a couple of these events together. And
Yes,
yeah, I mean, they're definitely very powerful. And I think there's something about, doing that work, with other people that makes it even more impactful. So yeah, I can definitely, attest to the power of those types of events. Doing that work, like you say, I mean, it's not easy though. And being able to do it though, that's what, really empowers us, and starts to set us free of the things that have been holding us back.
agreed. There is a huge power in numbers. That I really believe that, like, I'm not really a fan of the word self-help, because I think really the only thing that we do on our own is to make the decision for change. And after that, it is such a team effort to have someone in your corner, or a team or a community in your corner, to really um, support you and love you, and give you the tools that you need to to battle these demons on a daily basis. It's very paramount. I mean,
Yeah, that,
that's
that
what I tell
support is so
everybody.
important. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And it's free most of the time. I feel like everybody feels like that it's going to cost money to get a coach, or to do something, but there's communities out there all over the place that are there to support people with where they're at, and how to get through it. And yeah, I always recommend people, if nothing else, find a community that you can belong to, so you can talk about this stuff. Someone that understands what you're going through. I think that's very powerful.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And were you able to receive support from your family as well? Like
Uh,
once you told them about what had happened?
you know, I think the support that I received was being accepted. I really, really fear rejection, really fear judgment. And that was what was kind of funny to me, being a grown man and still worried about being judged by my parents. Because, dude, I live 1,200 miles away. They're not going to ground me. It's not like, they're not. I'm not going to get that beating that I got when I was a kid. It's just crazy how that stronghold had. But just to be accepted, and for what I thought was going to happen or could happen, for it to not happen, and for them to be so very, just, I don't want to say sorry. Uh, they were just so compassionate, and really just. I know it really hurt my mom, and I know my dad feels a lot of guilt about uh, about our childhood, and I think this really opened the door for conversation, and I've started a nonprofit to put in the cycle of domestic abuse, and to tell my dad that that's what I'm doing. And he's not like jumping up and down with pom poms or anything, but he says okay. And for him to just be okay with it, and to not say, Matt, you should think twice about it, or to make me feel like I should put the brakes on it, but to just give me 2 letters, okay. It's like that was the support that I needed, and they're supportive. They're not stopping me, and they're letting me tell my story, and I think they know that it really helps other people to talk about this for the first time. Because like I said, for me, I was 35 when I finally started talking about it. And, there's plenty of people out there that haven't. I mean, my dad's 65, 70, and I don't know that he's ever talked about his childhood. I know he hasn't talked to me about it to me. So there's some guys people that just never get the chance to talk about it or get that support that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good, and you're working to break that cycle, and that's how you have to do it. You have to talk about it, and as difficult as that may be, it's so much better to break that cycle than to continue it.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's great. So Matt, are there any other things that have been really helpful to you in your healing journey that we haven't touched upon yet?
Well, so just real briefly, these last 8 years, like I mentioned, I got laid off in 2010, and for the first 4 years there, I was trying to do everything on my own, like very much stuck in the doing. It wasn't until I got my coach, Jim Binger, who really, that's when life really started turning around for me. So I have so much respect and so much love, and I give my coach so much credit for pulling me through the muck these last 4 years. I know without her, I would still be that depressed dude hibernating in his apartment, not talking to people. I certainly wouldn't be starting a nonprofit. I certainly wouldn't have gotten all the pay raises that I've received at work, just because I know she kept my mind straight. She made sure that I saw how worthy I was. She made sure I saw how much value I provide to myself and to others. And I can't give her enough credit. I know that alone has probably been the biggest cause of transformation for me, and to just keep transforming. That it's a lifelong journey for real, and every day is a chance to improve. And I can't speak highly enough of having a coach or someone in your life to be able to see from the outside in what's going on, and to be able to see the good in you, and to guide you in a direction that serves you most, that doesn't serve them. It serves, I think that's the great thing about a good coach, is they're all about doing what serves you, not what serves them. And she always believed that I had the answers inside me, and that's what she does. She pulls those answers out of me with a lot of questions and a lot of just awareness of what's really happening in life. So
yeah, and of course I know Jen as well, and she's awesome. And I love the story of how she saw that potential in you, right? And she took a stand for you. And now, here you are today, doing all these great things, and you've, made these awesome changes in your life. So that's just great. It's such a great story, as to how, coaching has been such a huge help for you in your healing. So Matt, tell us, how are you doing today? And are there, any things that you're still struggling with?
Yeah, absolutely.
We all are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much a daily life. This thought this morning just came through my brain, and it was, life is just every day is a chance to practice. Every day is just another day to get better. It's not another day to, it's not like this is it. Whatever you do today decides the rest of your future. No, it's just today is practice and being better. And that's the approach. I'm sorry, Melissa, I kind of digressed.
Yeah, I was just
What was
asking, how you're doing today and, what sorts of things
doing
you still
good?
struggle with.
Yeah. So, what am I struggling with? I still struggle with being overwhelmed. I when life gets busy, I still resort to that coping mechanism of hibernating and cutting people off. Um, it's it's not months and months of cutting people off anymore. It's more like days or maybe a week. So that's the one challenge I'm still working with is getting that from days and weeks to maybe hours or just a day of where I have this um, just where I just go into disconnection mode where I disengage. And life has been extremely busy for me lately, just at work. This has got to be the busiest I've ever been in my entire life. At least I feel like it is, but I feel like the evidence is there that proves it too. I, I, I have the most projects as an inspector at my place of work, and I'm building a nonprofit, and I'm working on a book, and I have an abundance of great things happening in my life, and they're all great. It's just my body, my subconscious says, "Oh crap, Matt, here we go again. Things are getting a little out of hand. Time to just take a nap, get some rest, so that you can tackle this stuff, later." And those 10-minute naps, 30-minute naps turn into 8-hour actual sleeping sessions, and then nothing gets done. So here I am looking at like 2 months worth of paperwork to go through and to get caught up on. So that right now is my current challenge, of not letting myself get to the point of overwhelm, to the point where it really is a problem. And to squash that within, a day or several hours versus letting it drag on for weeks. However, it is the improvement of not being disconnected for months. So there definitely is improvement happening. It's just that's definitely still one of those things I'm working on. Definitely still a challenge in my life. Just dealing with overwhelm and not letting myself just go to sleep on it.
Yeah. Well, you're aware of it, right? And that's the important part. And so it sounds like you have some tools that you can use and implement to try to make that less of an issue in your life. And that's that's what it's all about. It's like you said. I mean, every day, we get to practice at this stuff and just try to get a little bit better. Like that's all it's about. Just get a little bit better than you were the last time that you were dealing with it. And just focus on that, But it sounds like, overall things are going well for you, which is great.
Yeah, man. I'm training for obstacle course races. I'm making a really good living with actually minimal effort. Like a lot of people work really hard to make minimum wage, and I think I've got one of the best jobs I could ever ask for. And there's just health and wealth is definitely up right now. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of things to be grateful for, and just constantly learning about relationships, with myself mostly, and how that translates into how I show up in relationships outside of myself, like romantically or even at work, so.
Yeah. And so, go into more detail about what it is you do today and, share more about your nonprofit that you're starting up.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So I have become a certified coach. It must be because I was so inspired by my own personal coach, right? Like I really want to create that support system for others, and my mission is specifically for men, to get men who feel like there's no hope, that they're just stuck in this rut, or they're stuck in this way of being. I guess I always just picture my dad, and I know that he loved us, and I know that he wished he could have shown us love differently. Um, and I don't know. I know there wasn't internet back then, so and guys just don't talk about what's going on. Guys don't raise their hand and say, hey, I'm struggling with not hitting my wife, or I'm struggling with, not making my kids feel good. Guys just don't talk about that a lot, or not enough. I mean, it's starting to happen. It's not on a scale that everybody is comfortable with talking about these things.
Well, yeah, I
And
mean, there's that stigma in general, and with men, it's even more so, right?
right, yeah, because men, we're not supposed to be talking about feelings or having feelings, because that's what women do. Women talk about their feelings. Guys, they just buckle down and push through it and do whatever they gotta do to provide. And in emotional feelings, that stuff that doesn't that just doesn't register as part of the equation for success. And that's definitely something that I've found that absolutely is part of the equation. I mean, all of our decisions, well, at least 90% of our decisions are all emotional based, right? And men really do a really good job of suppressing emotional feelings. So it really makes you wonder where we're coming from with all of our decisions. It's all a logical based decision, and it's usually in our brains. With the things we tell ourselves are usually we're not usually in a very good place, is what I'm saying. And I think this is where the abusive cycle just keeps perpetuating, because we just don't talk about our feelings, and we just think we're going to power through it. Little do we know we're creating the next generation to do the same thing. And that's where I come in. I support men, and I coach men in redefining their purpose, or even having a purpose in life, and creating habits and a way of being that support them in pursuing their dreams versus what they're currently doing. And so, kind of rambling. So what I really do is I support men in changing out their habits, their old habits, for their new habits, so that they're not so dependent on their old response mechanisms. So that we're reprogramming their mind and their subconscious to move towards what it is they want, not what it is they don't want. We're moving from scarcity to abundance in their mindset, and that's my mission right now. That's the purpose for my nonprofit, is to support these men. Eventually, I'll be able to support men who can't afford this coaching, and be able to provide families with support that are going through domestic abuse. But yeah, right now I'm building it through a coaching practice, and I get to be that example. So every day I get to be the example of what men can do when they work on transformation and start working on personal development.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome. And I look forward to seeing, where that goes as you continue to build that. And I know that you have a book that you're working on. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's called Breaking Free from the Cycle. And what I'm doing is I'm interviewing, for this first book, I'm interviewing four men, and I'm one of them. I'm interviewing people from different ethnicities and cultural backgrounds, so that men can see that no matter who you are, where you're from, we're all dealing with some sort of cycle that is sabotaging our life. And these men that I'm interviewing have been able to overcome these sabotaging cycles. And what I really want to do is bring hope to the men who feel like they're stuck or feel like this is just the hand they've been dealt, and this is just life. I want to bring hope and possibility to men that there's a different way, that life can be different, that we can find joy in your life. It doesn't have to be a life of scarcity and fear. It can be a life of abundance and prosperity and joy. And there are men who are going through what you're going through, and they have made it they've made it through to the other side. And that's the basic premise of life at the moment.
Oh, that sounds great. And any idea when that might be coming out?
Yeah. So I'm aiming to have the launch date be in December. I'm shooting for the beginning of December. It's looking like maybe mid to end of December. So yeah, it's exciting. It's coming up fast. Amazing how fast time flies as you get older. But yeah, by December I should have my book launched.
Oh, very exciting. There you go. Can be a Christmas gift for some people.
Yeah, that's a very good thought.
Nice. So Matt, I want to ask you the final question that I have for you today. Yeah. And that is, given what you know now, if you could go back to when you were going through your tough times and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
I feel like the normal thing to say is just everything is going to be all right. I think the younger me could have really heard that you're perfect the way you are, and that things are the way they are because it's preparing you for something great in the future. Just to let my younger self know that everything is the way it's supposed to be, and that you are perfect right now in this very moment.
Absolutely. So, Matt, before I let you go, what is the best way for people to connect with you or learn more about everything you have going on?
Well, I have a website that is up and running, and it's definitely my baby. It's constantly morphing. It is the URL is myalphalife.org. That's myalphalife.org. I have a place there where you can connect and even schedule a 30-minute phone call with me, and we can just talk about what's going on and what possible next steps are.
Oh, that sounds good. I'll definitely have that linked up on your show notes page.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Matt, I just want to thank you for coming on here today and for joining me to share your story with us. And hopefully, those listening have been inspired by it. And, especially the male listeners, hopefully they've been able to identify with your story and, helps to let them know that it's okay to talk about this stuff. So just thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Every time I get a chance to speak about this, there's always new insight, and I really appreciate you for creating that space. And you're a lovely person. I love talking with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
I will. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the show today. This has been the Grass Gets Greener podcast, episode 139. Go to thegrassgetsgreener.com/Matthew Greer to find the links mentioned during this episode or to leave a comment. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you are a male survivor or someone who supports one, I hope that you in particular found it to be helpful. I love how Matt is raising awareness for the struggles that men face as survivors and is working to give them a voice. I think the important thing to take away from this episode, regardless of whether you are a man or a woman, is to speak out and talk about what you've been through if you haven't yet, so that you can begin to understand its impact on you and heal from it. And I know that can seem scary, so even if it's just finding one safe person you can confide in, that will be an important step. So I hope Matt has inspired you to do that. And come back for the next episode. I'm looking forward to bringing you more inspiring episodes your way over the next year. And also head over to the website to grab your free copy of the Top 10 Strategies Guide for Survivors. In it, you'll find the top 10 most common strategies my podcast guests have used for overcoming the effects of past trauma. It's a great place to get started if you're looking for some strategies that can help you in your healing, as they have helped my guests. And you can find that at thegrassgetsgreener.com/guide, or also on the show notes page. So be sure to grab that if you haven't yet. And lastly, don't forget to head over to iTunes or Stitcher to leave the show rating and review so that we can reach as many survivors as possible. And as always, have hope.